Focaccia Adventures here. It's been a while. We are back. Kim is going to cook a pot roast tomorrow because we're going to have some crappy weather. And she says that we need bread to go with it. So I'm going to make a focaccia. And I'm not going to make just any old focaccia. We're going to make a focaccia stuffed with Kalamata olives. And so we'll walk you through this. This is actually a very easy bread to make. It comes out delicious. First, we're going to start off with basically a pint of Kalamata olives. And very important in this recipe is we're going to take the brine, and we need to have brine from the Kalamata olives. And we're going to use this beautiful brine as part of the moisture when we actually make our bread dough. That ensures that we get a characteristic of olive throughout the bread. Every bite, whether you have an olive in it or not, is going to have some essence of olive. So this is a really important step. Make sure you get the brine when you get your Kalamata olives. Now, we like getting unpitted because, quite honestly, pitted olives for our taste, our palate, are typically too briny. They're just too damn salty. So I get unpitted Kalamatas, and we have a fancy $10, I might even be $8 pitting device here. And Kalamatas are really one of the easier olives to pit. I even get little nuggets because they're so soft. So we're going to pit these Kalamatas. We're going to shoot pits all over the kitchen. That's kind of par for the course. And actually, it's part of the fun. We'll find olive pits for probably 6 weeks after we do this recipe. Ooh, there's another piece. With nice stuff on it. We're going to get these all pitted up, and then we'll be ready to make our dough. Okay, we got all our olives pitted. We got their beautiful juices, beautiful brine. Now our next step is we need to dice these olives up a little bit. Now there's two reasons for doing that. One is I'd really like to shoot for an olive in every bite, and you can't do that. You'd have to use a whole lot of olives in order to do that. And the problem with that becomes that the dough becomes unworkable because it's more olive than dough. So we want to make sure that we've just got little pieces so that the dough is still workable. We still, even though it's focaccia, we still have to work this dough a little bit. The other thing is when we pit this olive, we create a hole through the olive. And that hole can collect dough. Now this isn't pasta where we want sauce to get in every nook and cranny. If dough gets inside the olive will insulate the dough in the baking process, and the dough will not bake. It will have raw dough inside our olive. Raw dough is not a good thing to have when we're eating our bread. So at the very least, we're going to slice this horizontal or vertically. Get your horizontal and your vertical straight. We're going to slice it vertically so that we have a little trough, but we don't have a hole that dough can poke into and be insulated from the heat of baking. Now, for me, I'm probably just going to take another crisscross and make 4 little pieces, just so that I can make sure that I have a more even distribution. You don't want to just cut them in half though, because now you have 2 holes that dough can get into and might not get all the heat of baking, and you might still end up with raw dough. Okay, it's dough time. What do we need for our dough? Well, of course, we need flour. So we gotta have 500 grams of King Arthur flour. Now notice I have the old King Arthur label, the non-woke label, because obviously nights are too violent for people in the kitchen. I'll save these forever. We have our flour. We have our scale. We do all baking with a scale, not 2/3 of a cup. We have our bowl that we will mix all our ingredients in. Now, focaccia is a really sloppy dough. We don't want to touch that. We don't want dough all over the counter. So we've improvised a couple of unique tactics in order to make this dough handling as pleasant as possible without making a mess. I mean, I don't want to clean this up all night. Secret. This is a Mercer, like Hell's Canyon spatula spoon thing. We will use this to turn the dough over and over and over again, so we don't have to touch it with our beautiful hands. Get our rings dirty, stuff like that. These are really cheap. They're like 10 bucks. They come in different lengths. This is the shorter length. There's another one that's like this long. So if you're, I don't know, if you want to churn butter or something, you got something to do it with. This recipe will typically call for 500 grams of flour, 350 grams of water. In our recipe, we'll probably, looks like we've maybe got 80 to 100 grams of brine. And so we'll substitute that for the water. But we will get the yeast and the water going before we introduce our brine, so the salt doesn't have an impact on the brine's feasting. There'll also be a little dollop of honey in there so that we kind of supercharge the yeast and really get them hungry before we start mixing up our dough. Okay, we got our water. What temperature water do we want? We want to be somewhere between 95 and 105. I kind of like being closer to 95. I've done batches at 105, and sometimes the yeast doesn't do 105 too well. Okay, that's good. Now we're going to put 12 grams of yeast in there. It actually takes more yeast than you think to get to 12 grams. And now we're going to get a dollop of honey to go in as well. Okay, I don't use no tablespoon with the honey. We just pour it in, get a glop, and then cut it off. And if your wife's not looking, you can take a taste, but I think she's back there now. Use the Mercer. This will work. We got nice and warm. We got the honey in there. And next, we're just going to let this sit for about 10 minutes and let the yeast have a feast. It's the very least we could do before we make the beast. Not too bad. So I don't know how well you can see this, but the yeast is definitely getting to work because we've got a bubbly, foamy goodness in here. So we're at 225 grams of water. We need to be at almost 400. We're using King Arthur bread flour. And King Arthur bread flour takes a little bit more water than King Arthur all-purpose because of the difference in protein levels. If you're using AP, you're probably going to get the right dough consistency at about 350 grams of water. With the bread flour, we've seen consistently that we need 400 grams of flour in order to get the right consistency, the right hydration in our dough. Okay, so I like to add a little bit of bread flour with it on the scale. I'm probably going to add like 100 grams at a time. And then we'll take it off and stir it off the scale. I don't like to stir it on the scale. Looks like we need to retar. Scale turned off on us. So we're going to put 100 grams of flour in there. And that was 75 grams right off the bat. Oops, we spilt a little. Let's just go 150. We got 150 in there. And we're going to take this and set it down. And we're going to just stir it in. Now, this is going to be really, really sloppy. That's okay. But we want that moisture to be absorbed into the flour as best it can. And you don't get that by dumping 500 grams of flour directly in to the 350 or 400 grams of water. So we want the flour to absorb the water. So that was our first 150 grams. Let's put another 150 grams in there. Get us up to about 300 grams. And we're at 305. And we're just going to do the same thing. Oops. Except we don't want to throw it all over ourselves. Sorry about that. Sorry about that, Kim. I just want to get this started. I want this fermentation to get started before we add the salted water. Okay, we got a pretty gnarly sticky dough here. So we're going to go and that's about all I'll have to touch dough this entire process. Right now we're sitting at like 300 grams of flour. We're going to add 125 grams of brine to this. Ooh, we just screwed it all up, huh? Yeah. Now we're going to add another 25 grams of just water. And that should get us to a beautiful place. We hope. Ooh, look at that. Let's go ahead and slide the scale out of the way. This becomes more an exercise. Who the heck knows what we're making now? Don't lose me here because I know this looks really weird for you bread makers out there. Like, what the hell kind of bread dough is that? Okay, so we're getting there. Last time I did this, I actually used the dough whip to actually get it a little creamier faster, but it really doesn't matter. We need to put 200 more grams of bread flour in here. You can see it's actually, and I hope you can see this, it is actually starting to bubble already. The yeast is on the loose, and so we're in a good spot. I'm going to go ahead and put the rest of this flour in, stir it up, and we'll get us to a spot where it looks like a dough that we can continue to work with. Okay, so we're almost there. I just want to show you this. We're just going to do this little motion where we're just kind of folding the dough onto itself over and over. And that's providing basically two things. We're actually kneading our dough this way, and we're making sure that we get all the flour worked in. And we will skip the salt. If you're following a traditional focaccia recipe, we'd be adding the salt at this point, but we've put in the brine, and we don't want this to get away from us on a salty perspective. Okay, we've got ourselves a nice pink dough here. Now, obviously, if you're not using Kalamata olives, your dough isn't going to be pink, but it's because of that Kalamata brine. It's a very sticky dough, but it does pull away from the sides of the container pretty well. So now we're going to add 2 tablespoons of olive oil. And actually, I'm not going to use that one. I'm going to use this one because I know how this one pours from a time perspective. So 2 tablespoons. 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004, 1005, 1006. And it's focaccia, so what the heck, one more. Now we're just going to continue to work. And we're going to work that olive oil into the dough. And we're going to do that for a couple of minutes. Now, just so you have something to base on, the previous scraping and folding, spooning, we did that for about 5 to 7 minutes to get everything incorporated. We'll only have to do this for a couple of minutes. So you're not a slave to this for an hour, but you will build up a little wrist and forearm strength if you do this enough times. So we got this sloppy dough going. Hey, I thought we were going to put olives in this. Yep, we got to put the olives in there. So let's just sprinkle a good half of that. Start working it in. And they don't want to work in. You just got to keep tossing them and turning them. And you know, this is really kneading the dough. So olives are getting in there. We're getting some gluten buildup or something like that. I'm not scientific on this, but we're getting some stuff going in that bread. Let's put some more in there. You know what? Another cool thing, you're allowed to snack. Delicious. Love Kalamata. So that, as you can see, they're kind of all sticking to the outside. We're going to work them to the inside. And we will have us a mass of completely olive infused dough. Want to switch directions on your spooning? That helps incorporate the olives into the center of the dough. So we get rid of this, looks like pimply dough with olives. Okay, so we've gotten to a point where the olives are basically incorporated into the dough well. You can see though, I mean, obviously you wouldn't want to put this dough on a table. Try to pick it up with your floured hands would not be a good idea. But the magical thing with this focaccia and with the olive oil is this bowl's almost clean. I'm just gonna, when this finally gets dumped out of here, we're just gonna rinse the bowl pretty much and we're done. We're not gonna have a big clotty mess of dried flour and all that other stuff that you normally get when making bread. And makes Kim happy that she doesn't have flour strewn all over her kitchen. So that's a good thing all the way around. Works for me. We are now going to let this rest for about a half hour. We're just going to leave it sit here. We're going to put cover on. These Sterilite bowls are really, really good for this. They come in different sizes. This is like the 7 or 8 quart size. And then there's also a 13 quart size that I use. They are perfect for mixing small, medium, large batches of bread dough. And even if you're just making traditional dough, they work really, really well for your initial mixing and kneading of the dough, getting the proofing. So we're going to put the cover on this, and we'll be back in a half an hour. Wow, it's a lot bigger than it was a half hour ago. So what do we do now? Now we're just going to fold it over a few times and we'll let it rest again. So basically you're just going to spoon in, fold it over, spoon in, fold it over. We're kind of pressing a little bit of the air out of this. We're just going to do this a few times till the dough gets a little bit smoother. Every time we work this dough, it's just going to get a little bit better, a little bit smoother. The olives are going to become a little more integrated into the dough. I mean, I have a turn here. Look, we can hardly see any olives. Remember, I mean, it was just like olive pimples before. Now, the olives are integrating well into the dough. And we're just going to do this maybe like 3 or 4 times around. Just exercising that dough. Notice the size of our bowl are even cleaner than before. I mean, this olive oil just really takes a lot of the mess out of this. Okay. Kind of shake it out a little bit. Shake it out. Shake it out. Oh, my Taylor. And now, even though the stove behind me went ding, 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 we are going to let this set for another hour. It's been actually about an hour and a half. We had some errands to run, but it's a good way to show just kind of how foolproof this recipe is. We do a little things, a little different here, a little different there, and everything seems to work out all right. So let's get into this. So we're going to open this up and look at this thing. I mean, we've almost completely filled the bowl. And so a lot of recipes, Luke, so, you know, this is no fabulous original recipe. This borrows from a lot of different recipes online. Whew, look at the size of those bubbles. That's awesome. That's what we want. This is very alive right now. There's tons of different focaccia recipes on the internet. They're not all, there's nothing really exciting. They're fairly similar. But one of the things that they'll tell you to do if you're using a bowl recipe is they're going to tell you to dig your hands in there at this point. Grease them up, dig them in there, and do some folds. There's no need to get your hands in even at this point. We're just going to use the old spatula, and we're going to fold and stretch. Ooh. But we want to pull and get a good little stretch on there. We don't want the whole thing pulling away from the bottom, because quite honestly, the bottom's giving us some of the stickiness to give us a decent stretch. So you may be saying, well, that's not really a fold. It's not a big stretch. But you know what? In the end, it really won't matter. It really won't. It just matters that you're moving the dough around again, giving it some amount of movement. And there is a little bit of stretching going on. Not high caliber, stretching it all out to here kind of stuff. But you know, it really doesn't need it. Okay. So we've done that, you know, just 3-4 times around the bowl. The dough, you can see, has a nice consistency. It has a nice smoothness to it. Remember all that roughness and bubbliness and just how weird this dough looked for quite a bit of the time getting going? Well, we're good now. And this dough is really set up really nice. Now, it's focaccia. So what do you think we need to do now? We need to oil up a pan. And what we're going to do here is we're going to oil up a pan. I've got these, what are these? These Nordic ware pans. Man, I tell you what, I love these things. I think the original ones we got at Sur La Table. They're available on Amazon. I think Williams-Sonoma carries these as well. I'd be kind of worried on Amazon about getting a counterfeit, but these pans are really nice. This pan's been cooked in at least a half dozen times, and it looks like it just came out of the store. Nothing has stuck to this in the slightest bit. Now, you're going to say, Tim, well, you put a ton of olive oil in it for focaccia, and that is true. But I've had focaccia, oh man, you want some sticky stuff? Cook focaccia in a glass baking pan, and then you'll spend about an hour carving it out. These Nordic ware, really, really, I highly recommend. So we're going to oil this thing up, and I'm going to leave the camera running for a second, because you're going to be shocked at how much oil we're going to put in this thing, even though we just put a ton of oil. But this is focaccia. This is Italy. It needs a lot of oil. Okay, so we're going to coat. Make sure that we coat the entire surface. Get it around the edge. And then the next step is we're just going to roll this. We're just going to pour it literally into the pan. I probably should have poured it from the other side so that you can see it better. But I'm not a YouTube star. We just make these occasionally. Okay, look how clean the bowl is. I'm just going to throw that over to give it a quick rinse, put a little soap in, and it'll be done. I don't have to carve out, like I said, I don't have to carve out a ton of stuff. Okay, so we want this. Now here's the trick. It's not really a trick, but here is one of the things. The focaccia, it doesn't stretch very well. It wants to pull back to its natural shape. And you want it to fill the corners, but it's kind of tough. It kind of has a mind of its own. So now we put it in the pan. We're going to cover this pan, and we are going to let this sit for 45 minutes. in that 45 minutes, we're going to preheat the oven. And then we'll do our final prep. We'll actually get our fingers a little dirty as we dimple the focaccia. We'll re-oil the top. We'll spread some salt on there, some flake salt, and we'll pop it in the oven for 20-22 minutes. This is an interesting one. We're probably going to put it in at about 425. Some of the recipes say as hot as your oven will go. And we've got way too much color way too fast when we've done it that way. Well, I want a nice, really deep golden to reddish brown. And putting the oven at 550 just doesn't achieve that. So we'll put it in the oven probably about 425, maybe 450, and should be about 20 minutes. We'll see see how that goes. Okay, we are there. We will unwrap. Look at how we've grown. They've actually grown into the corners, so it didn't really matter if we couldn't stretch it there. Saran wrap. Put it back there. Now comes the fun part. So this is where we get our fingies a little dirty. So because we don't have enough olive oil on this yet, we're going to put a little more olive oil on there. And we're going to dimple. Dimple, 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 dimple. We're just going to poke it. Poke it. Poke it. Poke it. Get back here in the bed here so you can see it better. Ooh, look at that nice bubble coming out. Ooh, so we'll poke it to force it a little more into the corners. We're going to poke it and poke it. We want it to have all these little dimples. Look at these bubbles coming out. That's awesome. Okay. Boop, boop, boop. How awesome is that? I think we pretty much got enough olive oil on the top. It looks pretty good. You know what? All recipes say put more olive oil on. You can never put enough olive oil on. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put some flaky salt on. And then we're actually going to sprinkle a little water on the top. So we have a little bit of water in the oven getting ready to boil. We want that high humidity in the oven when we first put this in for our initial browning of the crust. So I've got cypress flake salt here. You can use any kind of salt. I like the flake. I like it better than the medium grind sea salt because sometimes if you get a little over aggressive in your sprinkling with the medium grind sea salt, you can get some pretty salty stuff. We have a lot of salty stuff going on here anyways with the brine and the olives. So we're going to just be fairly ginger in applying this flake salt. We want to make sure that we get it everywhere. That doesn't mean that we coat the entire thing, but we don't want to have significant areas that didn't get any salt. And that's really it. Next piece is a little dribble of water. And there's some water here. So we're just gonna, well, that was a little much. We don't really want that kind of dribblage. So we just want it to fall off our fingers. We just want to have some water on the surface of the focaccia for when we put it in the oven. It's part of what our dimples are for, and I think we're ready to go. Set the timer to 20 minutes. Turn the oven light on so we can have a peek, and we'll see where this goes. Okay, we got the dinger going, so let's get a hot pad, make the dinger stop. We've had 20 minutes. I did spin it with about 7 minutes left to go. And I kind of like the way that looks. That looks about right for coloration. Get this out of the way. And I don't know if you can hear it. But it's making really nice poppy noises. Look at that. Whoa. Let's see if we can get this out and onto the cooling rack. And typically, these have just, and this looks like it's going to be another example. I'm going to have to get on it from a couple of different sides. Ah! Catastrophe. What the heck? See, this is the kind of stuff that happens all the time. You have to accept the unplanned. There we go. Okay, we're going to move this over here. And hopefully, we slide that little guy in there. And slide this guy in here. Both of them are upside down. And lift out onto our drying, or cooling rack. And we left the olive behind. Ooh, there's the bottom. That's some amazing camera work. Okay, it's time to get this down to business so we can have it with the shrimps that are simmering here. So let's take a look. Let's see what we got going here. Ooh, look at that. It's pretty beautiful, quite honestly. And it looks like there's going to be an olive in every bite. So moist. That's a big bite. Salt's about right. I'm glad we didn't add any salt to the dough. Just the salt from the brine's enough. Pretty good. We'll do this again. Take care, everybody.